Hello, I'm Galen Switzer, and I'd first like to say thank you to the organizers at the Donor Research Network for the opportunity to speak during their week of talks. I am a professor of medicine, psychiatry, and clinical and translational science at the University of Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And for the past 25 years or so, our research group has been actively involved in research on living organ and tissue donation, with a particular emphasis on hematopoietic stem cell donation. So today, I'd like to give a brief overview of the donation process and then talk a little bit about some of our research on unrelated donors. So the title of my presentation is Motivations, Experiences, and Perspectives of Unrelated Hematopoietic Stem Cell Donors. Hematopoietic stem cell transplantation involves collecting stem cells from healthy living donors and giving them to patients with blood-related diseases, primarily leukemias, but also some other diseases. There are three ways to donate stem cells, and in the right panel, you can see down at the bottom, there are cord blood donors where the stem cells are collected from the umbilical cord after birth. And then there are two ways for unrelated adults to donate stem cells. One of them is bone marrow donation, and the other one is peripheral blood stem cell donation. So let me say a couple things about those. Bone marrow donation is a surgical procedure. It requires general anesthesia, and the marrow is drawn from the upper pelvis, the iliac crests of the lower back. There are some post-donation side effects. People often report lower back pain. That tends to resolve within a week or so. For most people, there are some people who have longer-term complications, including a lower back pain. Peripheral blood stem cell donation is a non-surgical procedure. A drug is administered to the donor that stimulates the stem cells to be released to the peripheral blood, and then that's collected in an apheresis-like procedure. The side effects for these type of donors occur pre-donation and usually involve some bone pain or fatigue due to the administration of the drug. There are a number of worldwide registries that recruit and retain unrelated stem cell donors. And this is the cumulative number worldwide in the blue line at the top. And you can see the number of donors at the end of 2020 was about 40 million worldwide who have volunteered to donate to somebody unrelated to them. The cord blood line is on the bottom and is fairly low and has remained constant across time. This graph shows the number of new donors, potential donors, that get added to these registries each year. You can see a fairly steady increase up until 2019 and 2020, where the drop-off occurred primarily due to COVID-related issues. We work with lots of different people. Our primary operations partner has been the US registry, Be the Match, National Marrow Donor Program, which is in Minneapolis, Minnesota. We've also worked with the Anthony Nolan Registry, which is the oldest stem cell registry of unrelated volunteers, based in the UK, as well as with DKMS, which is a German-based registry, and they have a footprint in the United States as well. So what does the donation process look like? So first, we have to recruit the donors. There are potential donors walking around in the world, and at some point they're recruited to or find the registry. So they join the registry. Then after some period of time, sometimes it's very quick, many times donors are on the registry for quite a while before they actually match a patient. They may be identified as a match for a patient, and then they need to agree to have additional testing, and they go in for that. Once they're confirmed as the best available match for a patient, then they will actually donate. The chances of actually finding a match for a patient range from 1 in 100 to about 1 in 10,000, depending on the rarity of the HLA type. So there are lots of donors on these registries who will never be called to donate. In fact, the percentage who will is relatively small. So talking about the kind of the rarity of HLA types, people with more diverse HLA types tend to have a more difficult time finding a match. You can see in this panel that for individuals who are white, and this comes from the National Marrow Donor Program statistics, The probability of finding a match is about 77%, and that declines across our other US ethnic groups all the way down to the left-hand side, where you can see that Black or African Americans have about a 23% chance of finding a match. So why do we focus on donors? We've obviously given this lots of thought, given that it's been our research focus for a number of years. So one of the things to think about is that it's always been a challenge for unrelated donor registries to recruit and retain sufficient numbers of donors for patients needing transplants. This has resulted in a chronic shortage of matched donors, and donor attrition after matching is also a problem. So these are individuals who are called and told that they're a match for a patient and then opt out of the registry at that point. Although the number of studies has been increasing, traditionally there have been few studies that have examined the psychosocial factors that impact individuals' donation-related decisions and outcomes. So let me just say a couple of things about how stem cell donation might fit in with other kinds of donations. So on the vertical axis there, you can see that we've arranged this from sustained or repeated kinds of helping to single instance helping. And on the horizontal axis, we go from non-emergency helping to emergency helping. And really, most types of helping fall into the upper left and lower right quadrants. So the lower right quadrant are kind of single instance emergency situations. And there are some examples there: disaster relief, auto accident assistance, burning building rescue, those kinds of things. In the upper left, you can see sustained, repeated, and non-emergency kinds of helping, being a big brother or big sister, volunteering for the Special Olympics, being a blood donor, volunteering in a soup kitchen, etc. Stem cell donation is different from these kinds of helping in some other ways, as well as living organ, solid organ donation is similar to stem cell donation in this respect, that it tends to be single instance non-emergency helping. It's also the case that for stem cell donors in particular, that their agreement to donate, that's when they join the registry, and the actual request to donate may be separated by weeks, months, or years in time. So what kinds of questions might we ask about donors? So we might ask, who is most likely to join the registry? What motivates people to join? How committed they are after they join? Why do some people drop out of the registry? Why do race and ethnic minorities drop out at higher rates than whites in the United States? And are there physical and emotional consequences to donation? And we'll touch on some of these in this talk today. So there are very few studies that have looked at willingness of the general population to join a stem cell registry. We did one study in conjunction with the National Marrow Donor Program that tried to look at this issue. One problem with doing research like this, as opposed to kind of volunteerism for blood donation, is that very few people are familiar with the registry, what it does, and have a low understanding of the donation process and transplantation process in general. So it's hard to ask them about their willingness to do something that they're unfamiliar with. In this study, we thoroughly described the donation process and then asked them whether or not they were willing to donate, along with a whole variety of other characteristics. Then, based on those characteristics, they were segmented into groups that had similar kinds of characteristics, and I'll talk a little bit about what those are in just a second. But you can see in this pie chart that we have various population segments and the level of willingness to donate that's attached to each of those segments. And you can see that the kind of blue-gray segment, 52% of those people were willing to join. And the brown segment right below it, 53% of those were willing to join. So those are our kind of high-value segments in terms of thinking about who's most likely to join the registry and potentially donate. We then named the segments based on their similarities, within group similarities. And those two groups are called Living My Faith, that's the blue-gray group, and Socially Connected. So what differentiates those two groups from the other segments? So the groups most willing to join the registry were different in terms of behaviors. So they were more likely to be organ donors, more likely to be blood donors, to volunteer time and to make financial contributions. That seems to make sense. they were also different in terms of some of their attitudes, including the importance of religion, the importance of giving back to society, involvement in the outside world, and higher levels of empathy. It's critical to note that demographics did not differentiate these groups, so you can't locate them by looking at demographic characteristics. So what are the motives for joining? And this comes from a study that looked at individuals who had been called and told they were a match for a patient and had either decided to move forward towards donation or to opt out of the registry at that point. You can see that on this page, the highest kind of frequency motives that were endorsed were things like being consistent with the worldview, raised to help others, it was easy to do, wanted to give back, would feel good to help others. And you can see also that there are dramatic differences in the rates at which those who continued in the top lighter blue bar endorse these motives as opposed to those who opted out. So these motives all in general were more likely to be endorsed by those people who continued towards donation after they were asked. Some additional motives: believing in the cause, believing in supporting community, consistent with religious beliefs. And then these bottom two are much closer in terms of smaller differences between those who continued and those who opted out. Hearing about it at an event and actually being encouraged by others was the reason for joining the registry. We think those kinds of motives involve potentially some kinds of external pressures, either you're at an event with other people or somebody else said you should do this. And those are probably external kinds of motives and are probably not the kinds of internal motives that we might hope for among people who join the registry. So let's talk a little bit about internal versus external motives. We did some categorization of the reasons that people said they joined the registry, and they divided themselves into two kinds: internal versus external motives. So what we call internal motives involve some internal belief system that leads people to join the registry. Examples are: I just wanted to be able to give something back to help someone in need. It's something I feel I should do. I was raised to help others whenever possible. Being brought up Catholic means I believe we should serve others, and this is one way to do that. Now contrast those with these kind of more externally focused motives. I joined at a cultural event. I wanted to do something to support my group. Everyone at the university was signing up. It's a terrible thing to say, but I just went along. And finally, I joined because they were giving away free burritos. So those are clearly two different types of motive sets. So what does that mean in terms of whether or not those people are going to actually be available to donate when they're called as a potential match for a patient? So in the left here, we have those individuals who clearly expressed only internal motives. And about 92% of them moved forward towards donation when they were called as a match for a patient. Those who had mixed motive types were about 87% available, and those who had only external motives were not available at all, none of them. So you can see that the motives that people have for joining the registry are clearly linked to whether or not they're available when they are called as a potential donor. Another key factor that we've studied is ambivalence. So ambivalence has to do with a sense of hesitation or reluctance or concerns about donation. So this is a study that involved newly recruited members to the registry. So these are people who've just joined the registry. And you can see starting at the top, between 5 and 10% of them said that they had not yet decided to donate, that they might be relieved if they could not donate. About 20% said that they hope someone else could donate instead of them. And then between 30 and 40% said it would be hard to decide to donate if they matched, that they are unsure about donating, and that they have doubts and worries about donating. So these levels of ambivalence are interesting because these are among people who already joined the registry and signed an agreement to donate if they're called. So what does that mean when people are actually called back for a match? You can see that in the top bar, we have those who continued, again, when they were called back, and those who opted out are in the lower, darker bar. And the levels of ambivalence are much higher, as you might expect, among those people who opted out of the registry as opposed to continued. So ambivalence is linked to this decision that people make as potential donors. Finally, what does the actual donation process look like in the face of ambivalence? So this is a study that followed donors from pre-donation through post-donation. And what we found that if they were had higher ambivalence at pre-donation, that was linked to higher reports of physical difficulty with donation and psychological difficulty with donation at the shortly post-donation period. It was also linked with increased reports of psychological difficulty with donation, even at 1 year post-donation. So we believe that addressing donor concerns that may produce ambivalence at the pre-donation stage will likely increase donor commitment and improve post-donation physical and psychosocial outcomes. So in terms of the overall picture of who's more likely to opt out of the registry versus not when they're called back for donation, people are more likely to opt out if they've been a member of the registry for more than 4 years, if they report having delayed the decision to join, or if they were discouraged from joining, if they joined with a group of other people, that's again that kind of social pressure to join the registry. If they report that their ethnic group mattered in their decision to join the registry, and those who had more medical, family, and logistic concerns about donation. People who were less likely to opt out of the registry were more likely to be blood donors, more likely to have talked to relatives or professionals about donation. They reported more social, religious, or expected positive feelings for donation, and they were more likely to have joined online, which again is the opposite of social pressure, because people are kind of finding the registry and doing the joining part of the registry kind of individually in their homes. So another thing that we've been really interested in is younger versus older donors. So there is evidence that it's clear that younger potential donors aged 18 to 30 are both the most clinically desirable and the least available to donate. So they're clinically desirable because some characteristics of the stem cells and the volume that they can give. And they're also the least likely to move forward towards donation when they're called of any of the age groups. So the reasons for this higher unavailability in the younger group are unknown. So the question is whether or not this is something to do with age or generational characteristics. That answer has not been definitively provided yet, but the younger generation has been described as having a different sense of community, being less religious, less empathetic, more self-centered, more impulsive, more tech and social media savvy and engaged, and finally more likely to live with their parents. So let me talk a little bit about this study that we completed that compared younger potential donors to older ones. These are people who were members of the NMDP registry, National Marrow Donor Program registry. And you can see in the blue bars in the top, this is our younger age group, the 18 to 30-year-olds. And the yellow bar has our older age group, and they were 35 to 44. So across all motive types, you can see that it's interesting that the younger group is reporting a higher frequency of that motive for all of these types of motives: being raised to help others, consistent with worldview, wanted to give back, feels good to help, easy to do, and believe in the cause. So that is an interesting finding and potentially contrary to what we might have expected. The context for joining the registry is quite different for these people. So most of the younger group, 50% actually, joined at a college or university, and that was true for only 10% of the older group. We think that joining at a college or university may have the potential to activate this social pressure if they're joining as part of a group. In contrast to the older group being much more likely to have joined online. And we think that's probably a protective factor that will lead to higher levels of commitment, again, because they're kind of individually seeking out the registry to join. And then there were a variety of other kinds of contexts where people joined the registry. In terms of culture-based factors for joining the registry, The older group was more likely to say that religion was important. The younger group was slightly more likely to say, interestingly, that they might have religious objections to donation. That's in the second panel down. And finally, we always assess mistrust about how stem cells might be allocated to determine whether or not people think that the system is fair or not. And the younger group was slightly more likely to say that they had mistrust about how the system was going to be treating their stem cells if they donated. And this is a really novel and interesting finding, I think. This set of panels has to do with parental involvement. So if you look at the top left panel, it's clear that the younger group was much more likely to say that they would involve their parents in the decision about whether or not to donate if they were called back, 49% versus 17%. The next panel over to the right, still on the top, asks how important the parents' decision or opinion is in their decision to donate. And you can see that for the younger group, if you look at the combination of the green bar and the kind of purplish bar in the middle, you get 69% of them saying that their parents' opinions are either very or somewhat important. That's in contrast to the older group, in which only 44% of them said that their parents' opinion would be important. And finally, then in the bottom panel, if you look at that, the question is whether or not their parents would support their decision. And just look at the green part of the bar this time. 46% of the younger group said that their parents would fully support the decision. That's less than half. And 65% of the older group. So there is something going on here with the involvement of parents in the decisions of these younger donors of whether or not to donate. So overall, when we think about barriers to donation, particularly for this younger group, we see things like work and family related concerns. They're concerned about missing work, missing school. They're concerned that their family would worry. They have some medical concerns about pain, potential damage to their own health, and the use of needles. And they also have a set of other concerns, like who will pay for the procedure, getting to and from the donation center, and the use of the stem cells for some purpose other than what they were designed for, which is to go to a patient in need. So how do we ensure that we recruit the most committed donors? After a lot of thought and research, I think that one of the things that we can do is to reduce or eliminate external incentives. So eliminate gifts for joining, eliminate competitions for the number of registrants. So it used to be the case that on college campuses, fraternities and sororities would compete to see how many people they could get registered. And we think both those things are likely to lead to external pressures to joining rather than internal commitments. We could raise the bar for donation, or to join the registry, making it a little harder to join. We could ask people to make a small monetary contribution or to reaffirm their decision at certain points. We can make it easier to opt out. So let's say that we have a context where there might be some social pressure. You can imagine that we might want to provide a private opportunity to opt out of the registry at recruitment, or maybe mail in or email a postcard for opting out after they've already joined. And finally, we can tailor messages to known ethnic related concerns because we know that ethnic minorities are more likely to opt out of the registry than their non-minority counterparts. So how do we enhance commitment of people who are already on the registry? So to prevent them from opting out when they're called back for a patient. One of the things that we know is that when people are actively engaged, they're more likely to be committed. So is there a way to get registry members to do something? Because oftentimes between the time they join the registry and when they're called back as a patient, they're just sitting on the registry and they aren't actively engaged. So requiring them to periodically reaffirm their commitment to donate is something they could do. Encourage activity in other kinds of donation, like monetary donations, time volunteering, or blood donation might help bind them to this community of volunteerism. We know, for example, that the best predictor of who will become a committed blood donor is the number of donations in the first year. Stem cell donors can't do anything like that because it's usually only a single donation. So this idea is to try to come up with other ways that we could get them to actively engage. And finally, try to engage them and encourage community through social media. Are there ways to create interactive groups or other kinds of forums for them to interact that might encourage commitment? So overall, the positive side of this is that more than 90% of donors say that they're happy that they donated, and more than 70% say that donating made their lives more meaningful. When I first started out my career in studying altruism, I was working with Bob Cialdini, who was one of two great altruism researchers at the time, who were having an argument in the literature about whether or not there is any true altruism, any truly selfless altruism. And Bob Cialdini's argument was that virtually all kinds of helping that we can think of involve some kind of benefit to the person who is helping. That benefit may only be some kind of an internal good feeling, but he was of the opinion that there was very little true altruism in terms of true selfless kinds of helping in the world. Now, you might think that that would make him cynical or have a cynical opinion, but one of the quotes that I remember from him the best is that it's an amazing thing that we live in a world that teaches us we feel good when we help others. So he was always amazed by the social aspect of this, that we learn from a very young age that helping others makes us feel good. So that is something I carry with me, and that is something that's often expressed by stem cell donors. And with that, I will leave you. Thank you very much for tuning into this. I also, of course, need to thank all my collaborators. This is never an individual effort, and this is even only a partial list of the people who have been involved in our research over the years. Thank you again for listening, and have a good day.